I think it's high time we took another foray into the realm of multi-part videos. And since somebody requested it, we're going to do Anima Beyond Fantasy. Let's get to it. Anima Beyond Fantasy is a game from Spain. The English translation of the game was published by Fantasy Flight Games, and there also exists a French translation of the game. As of this recording, I've heard rumors of a German translation, but I haven't been able to find anything that was recent or substantial about that. The game has a very dense setting. It has two countries that are ready to start war with another, an inquisition that seeks out to hunt and destroy supernatural creatures, along with an order of knights that seek to hide the secrets of the supernatural world from the mundane world, and there's also loose alliances between factions of supernatural creatures that want to blend in with humanity. There's also an isolated country in the mountains that's extremely superstitious and filled with all kinds of horrifying phenomenon. And there's also a country in the Far East that's a lot more open-minded about supernatural powers. And there's also an amoral think tank that seeks to weaponize the supernatural. And that's just scratching the surface. This game is honestly worth getting just for the setting material and artwork, really. The rules of the game are equally as dense, but in my opinion are the right way to do a rules-heavy game. You have as many subsystems as you want, as long as they eventually end at the same core mechanic. It's also a good idea to include how they might interact with one another, and finally make it so that a player only needs to know the ones that are relevant to their character. And Anima does precisely all that, with a simple enough core mechanic. Anytime you make a roll for some skill or ability, you use a D100, and you add that result to said skill or ability, along with any modifiers you might have for the situation. You're looking to meet or beat a certain number depending on the difficulty of the task, and whether or not you're facing another character's roll. Since the game is based on a D100, it should go without saying that there's a lot of double and even triple digit numbers in this game. So if you're slow with that kind of arithmetic, you might want to have a calculator handy. The game's basic mechanic also includes fumbles for when you roll a 1, 2, or 3, which results in varying levels of horrible things to cause to happen to you depending on which one it is. On the opposite end of that spectrum are open rolls, and those occur whenever you roll a 90 or higher. Basically, you roll another D100 and add that to your result. And on your additional die, you can still get an open roll. However, the threshold for triggering an open roll goes up by 1. So on your second die, you need to roll a 91. On your third one, you need to roll a 92, and so on and so forth. Character creation in this game is a bit lengthy. There's a lot of details and choices for you to make. It starts with generating your characteristic scores, which at first range from 1 to 10, though over the course of the game it's feasible that they can become higher. The rulebook has numerous methods for generating these, and all of them involve some element of chance. Much like in D&D, each characteristic has an associated bonus that affects your rolls. There's not really much of a formula for figuring out what score correlates to what bonus, so you just have to use the chart printed in the book. The characteristics, along with what they're useful for, are as follows. Strength, which is lifting things and weapon damage. This is useful for like warriors and fighters. Dexterity, which is hand-eye coordination, and there's no one that does not somehow benefit from this. Agility, which is how quickly you move. It's not necessarily as important as dexterity, but anybody can also benefit from that. Constitution, which is physical hardiness, and it's used for things like resisting poison and disease. And it's also useful for determining how many life points and fatigue points you have. Then there's intelligence, which is your ability to use reason and logic. This is most useful for wizards. Then you have power, which is your character's spiritual strength, and that's once again most useful for wizards. Then there's also willpower, which is mental fortitude, and that's most useful for psychics. And last is perception. It's about noticing and perceiving things. It's not exceptionally useful, but it's something that you'll wind up cursing if you don't have enough of it. After you've generated and assigned your characteristic scores, you then calculate your character's resistance values. These are used for determining if your character succumbs to various natural and supernatural effects. They're calculated fairly easily using a certain characteristic bonuses and another stat called presence, which is determined by your character's level. Presence is important because there's a lot of magical effects that are governed by presence, but otherwise it's used as a basis for resistances. After that, you get 3 creation points, which are used for gaining various advantages. They're really just a bunch of odds and ends without much that unifies them. Though it's important to note that if you want a character that can use magic or psychic abilities, there's a specific advantage that you need to take for either one of those. They're best compared to feats or merits from Dungeons & Dragons or World of Darkness, respectively. You also have the option of taking some disadvantages to gain more of these creation points, though you're limited to only 3 disadvantages. And with all that, we're about halfway through with character creation. All that's left at this point is your race and your class. Anima breaks a few molds when it comes to races in fantasy RPGs. If you play as a different race, you're still technically human. It's just that your character has the soul of some otherworldly creature dwelling in them. So you're in a way a reincarnation of the race that you're playing as, and it kind of affects your physical body. From a game perspective, there's generally more advantage than disadvantage to choosing a different race, though all of them have one uniform disadvantage that's honestly a deal breaker for me. They don't gain as much experience at the end of a gaming session. This is true regardless of your race, with some actually having a greater penalty to the experience points than others. The final and perhaps most daunting step in character creation is picking your class and assigning your development points. I'm going to take a few moments here to explain everything that your class decides for you. Here's the information block for the class Weapon Master. Under the name of its class is a description of what the class is best suited for. The block on the right here includes the archetype of the class, which is used for determining how many development points it costs for you to change your class, as well as how many development points you have to pay in order to increase your life point total, which increases by your constitution score. It also includes a few other things your character gains every level, including the first level. Things like initiative bonuses, more life points, as well as martial knowledge and psychic points. These last 2 things I'll discuss in other videos. Next, we've got the primary ability listings. These include specific limits on how many development points you can spend in particular areas of your character, as well as specific costs associated for those things. Secondary abilities are divided into groups, and the costs here are how much it costs to raise one that belongs to a particular group. If there's any specific skills that are further reduced, they're in the reduced costs section. The last section is Innate Bonuses, which are more improvements a character gains for every level. These could include bonuses to certain primary or secondary abilities. If there's a special caveat for the class, it's also included somewhere around here. So that's all the basics of character creation, though I've still omitted quite a few sections of the rulebook. I'll cover the rest of those in other videos, but for now I'm only concerned with going over the basics. This is a game that gives you a lot of moving parts and freedom in making your character, though as a result it's pretty easy for somebody to make their character wildly ineffective by trying to cover too many bases at once. With that in mind, I've come up with a few guidelines for character creation. First and foremost, spend as many of your development points as you can on at least one of your primary ability groups. Spreading your points out as evenly as possible among everything you want to do is an effective way of making yourself bad at everything. Second, the magic number for being capable of something in Anima is the rating of 40. This is the threshold for an easy difficulty task. If you actually want your character to be good, you'll need at least 60, since 80 is a medium difficulty task. Most of the level 1 NPC write-ups in the book have at least 60 in their combat abilities, such as attack and dodge. So with that in mind, you'll probably want yours to be even higher, if you can manage that. Third, you have a lot of resources when building your character at level 1. This is kind of a reiteration of the first point, but it bears repeating. If for some reason you decide you want to have more than one primary ability, you'll be better served by making your character more effective at one of them as opposed to equally as good at both. Even if you have 20 in attack, dodge, magic projection, psychic projection, and 26 different secondary abilities, you're very likely to be outdone by the guy with 70 in attack and 50 in magic projection and stealth.
So there we have it. Those are the basic rules for Anima Beyond Fantasy, and a little bit about character creation. There's a lot of subsystems to this game, and I'm going to spend the next few videos talking about those. So, with all that said, I am Aaron Dershadel, and I will see you all next time.
Thanks for watching. As always, if you like this video, there's a thumbs up button somewhere you can use to show the whole world. Or at least the whole world that has internet access. This is the start of yet another multi-part series, but after we're done discussing Anima though, I've got a lot of real neat oddities to show you.